If you're passionate about fragrances and you never tried MEO FUSCIUNI's creations, you are missing out on one of the most intense experiences perfumery has to offer. Let's fix that. Hi, I'm Haze. I'm a singer, songwriter, and visual artist, but I'm here to chat about all the things that I love the most. Films, perfumes, books, series, and art in general that's weird, obscure, unsettling, or all the above. MEO FUSCIUNI's sample set comes with a little book in which the perfume himself describes every fragrance, the notes, the inspiration behind them, and his intentions. I was very curious to test the extent of the precision and conceptualism you can achieve using scents as an art form, and also test my own nose. So that's how I decided to try his creations. I tried them on completely blind to any description, wore them for a few hours, taking notes of my impressions, then compared my notes to what he wrote, and saw if they matched. And let me tell you, the results are very interesting. Let's get into it. The book begins with the trilogy of the journey, so that's where I started from. My first impression of Prima Nota di Viaggio was spicy and balsamic. Very foresty. The image I was thinking of was a melancholic forest, filmed in an antique-looking, contrasted black and white. An Ingmar Bergman setting. The light of the sun leaking through the leaves in the wind in an otherwise very dark setting. Something burned there, but the smoke itself is gone. Like the remains of some burned tires still lay there abandoned. And I know that when I smell burning tires, it's usually vetiver. Don't ask me why. This is what he wrote instead. A timeless elegance, enigmatic and dreamy. Everything was born in Istanbul. Each of us experienced a rite of passage in our lives, and for me it was a journey amidst the chaotic voices of the Grand Bazaar and the swirling scent of spices in the ancient market. The first travel note is my dedication to nomads, to souls always on the move and the elusive spirits. A warm and spicy perfume that from the very first notes of black pepper, grapefruit and bergamot celebrates the door to the east that was Constantinople. A perfume in continuous evolution, an olfactory metamorphosis that runs through the spices of the Grand Bazaar to the scent of the ancient and precious fabrics of the market. The perfume arrives at its beating heart, a warm bouquet of lang lang, jasmine, geranium, and rosewood, a dusty echo of nostalgia. From herbalist to perfumer, I left my way of the medical plant to embark on a new path, perfume as olfactory memory. Finally, I intertwined spiritual notes to create a woody, resinous, and deep base, benzoin, vetiver, patchouli, sandalwood, and incense. Like being at the end of the journey, alone, in one's own self, in a mystical and spiritual place of his magical city, of this suggestive door that looks to the east. I did get the spiciness and wild greenery with a resinous, stickier base. Seconda Nota di Viaggio has a very alcoholic, boozy opening. I perceived it as very aggressive and sensual. To me, it's what the idea of a tiger would smell like. Specifically, my mind produced the vision of a painted tiger drinking a mojito surrounded by the color red. Yeah. There are a lot of contrasting concepts that fight for my attention, both fresh and warm, wilderness and vintage elegance. But this is his description. Encounter is the enchantment of life, the joy of travel, the beauty of knowing the other. A journey to Morocco, a name to joy, to the happiness of the journey and the beauty of the encounter. Shukran in Arabic means thank you. The second note of travel, shukran, I hope I'm not butchering it, is my personal desire to tell through a perfume my travels in Morocco. The sacred ritual of the Berber people became the daily gesture of the meeting for every traveler in that place, the minty. Right from the start, this perfume unleashes its beauty, its energy in the green, aromatic, sweet, and sparkling notes of Moroccan dwarf mint. A riot of vivacity that also involves the note of lemon and litsi Kubeba. Every gesture becomes a smile. Every moment of this fragrance tells an encounter. The heart continues its journey between the aromatic notes of Moroccan chamomile and lemongrass that bring back the more Mediterranean notes of verbena. Happiness is as involving as a gnawa music coming from the coast of Essaouira. Its mentholated trail of eucalyptus creeps into the narrow alleys of the Medina. The red of the sunset of the earth on Marrakesh Square is as warm as the sweet and earthy tobacco that envelops our senses. It is as red as the warm scent of the sandalwood on which the base of the perfumes rests. I did smell the mint tea that he mentions, except I thought of mojito instead. And I definitely saw that red of the sunset and the warm earthy tobacco. It's very rare that I appreciate the smell of mint, but this was really fascinating. Terza nota di viaggio has an ultra-indolic sweetness. It's more of a crowd pleaser compared to the others, but with that Fusciuni's usual dirty, musty component that makes it less obvious. For my personal perception, it was very sensual and almost shameless. That's why I found the actual inspiration very funny in comparison. Eternal is the memory. Eternal is the scent of our childhood. A perfume dedicated to the love of my land, my roots, Sicily. I was born in the south of the world, in a place that I thought would be my eternal island. Chavuru d'amore means perfume of love, and it's an olfactory journey backwards in my memory. It tells about my childhood, the time of my youth, a dedication to my mother and my grandmother, a special dedication to my father, Bartolomeo. I remember the fig tree. Its body was large and it created shade in the flower garden of my grandmother Vincenza. There I spent the carefree time of childhood. The third note opens in the milky green notes of fig, in the bitterness of artemisia and bergamot. Everything is sweet and white over time, like mother's clothes, like the sun of Sicily. The earth of Chavuru d'amore is a floral bouquet of jasmine and ylang-ylang. It was the white flowers that created the reflection of light that still illuminate my eyes with emotion. As evening approached, we returned home after long walks. The austere notes of incense and the warm woody notes of cedar and sandalwood leaning on the sweetness of benzoin, everything became familiar to my memory, like a sacred summer procession. I remember the voices which slowly told the ancient stories. We were sitting around the table, still there, under the shadows of the big fig tree. In this scent, I told one of the most intimate chapters of my life. So yeah, a very different mood. Scent memory is a very subjective thing, but I totally see the Mediterranean landscapes and the fig tree he talks about. While wearing it, I noted down that it made me think of the sweet summer sweat line in the song Hotel California by the Eagles. Moving on, there comes what he calls the cycle of poetry. Luce, which means light, lives up to his name. I have synesthesia with colors, and I immediately saw shades of bright pastel yellow and warm leaning white while smelling it. It's the closest to a gourmand, quote-unquote, you could find in this set. In fact, to me, it smelled like a spicier version of cream custard, if that makes sense. Like a cake mix, but with something green and pungent too. I think I would have loved it a while ago, when I was more into gourmands. Now the opening is a bit too sweet for my current taste. The dry down is less edible though. Still warm but dirtier, which is exactly the type of thing I love. Let's say that pastel yellow slowly turns into an ochre. That's what he has to say about it. A perfect balance between silence and quiet of the soul. Luce draws inspiration from the perfect harmony of Louis Kahn architectures. Works in balance, a meeting point between silence and light. I wanted to use my creative sensibility to give voice to nature and its elements, as if they were architectural bodies on the background of nature. Luce was born from my desire for stillness, from the desire to create a balance between nature and man, between light and silence, an olfactory architecture of the soul. The sensory translation of this perfume opens with the harmony of birch and spruce notes, like a plant song at dawn, a slow awakening, a silent presence of man. The absolute balance between light and silence is totally manifested in its art. The intensity and the harmony of the sandalwood, patchouli and tobacco warm the soul. Quietness finds its fulfillment in the deep bass of this creation. A precious bed of amber and musks enveloping the warm notes of cedar, vanilla, benzoin, and a superfine leather celebrate this journey in an imaginary inner garden. A fragrance that envelops, protects, spreading its light far away. His opposite, Notturno, has quite a challenging opening. Like an acidic, sweet pineapple, which, spoiler, I only realized it does in fact remind of fresh ink after reading his description. In this case too, I particularly enjoy the dry down. As soon as it dries on the skin, that strange bitterness steps back to blend better with everything else. A warm but sharp leather comes out, which I really like. It quickly transforms, gaining charm, and it's like walking into an old basement for the first time in ages, full of wood and leather furniture. The stone walls are humid and musty, and bats are probably hiding in there somewhere. As I said, it's meant to have an ink note, as it is an ode to poetry, like ink in the art, he says. A tribute to the night, to poetry. Notturno tells of an inner journey within myself, a dark tunnel where I stop and think about the beauty of poetry, the word engraved by the ink of life. The heady notes of rum paved the way like a slap in the face. An ethereal journey in a distant time, imaginary and dark rooms of the mind. The earth of the perfume is enveloping, as the leather wrapped the old diaries of writers. A warm hint of spices, birch, and an elegant and dark leather accord guards a delicate scent of flowers. It is here, in this instant of the night, that the notes of ink introduce the poets that have marked my life. There is a moment in this perfume where I wanted a sensual and romantic mutation. It is its land, its base. The warm notes of amber and musk, the creamy and enveloping notes of sandalwood, the spiritual notes of cedarwood and incense. The dusty and smoky memory that remains on us is the soul of poetry. Notturno signified an important passage in my journey, a perfume in which I wanted each of us to confront with ourselves, with the poetry that has marked our lives. But some of my favorites from this set are contained in the Mystic trilogy. Narcotico is an explosion of dusty warmth. Before looking at the notes, I thought incense, animal skin, and pencil shavings. I imagined walking inside the cage of a cryptid or a fantasy animal, like the cradle of a fire-spitting dragon. And you can't even see the dragon itself because it's too dark, or it's not there anymore at all. Maybe it's behind you. No, but seriously, this is where I started being very impressed with the photographic precision. Fusciuni translates very complex concepts into olfactory experiences. Narcotico is supposed to be an upsetting journey inside yourself and your memories. That's in fact how he describes it, as meeting your monsters. The most intimate depths of our soul. The perfume takes shape, tells our story, who we are. The encounter with our deepest memories can be upsetting. This is what I tried to create with Narcotico, a personal journey deep in the most hidden olfactory memories of my soul. Narcotico tells, through a trip to Palermo, a city of 1,000 contrasts, among its alleys and churches, the spiritual journey of the soul, of my personal relationship with the sacred. The opening of the perfume is strong, pungent, obsessively angular. Incense and thyme blend and slowly open the doors of its sacred place, the memory. The contrast continues without end, between the sweet notes of tonka bean, benzoin, and floral accord, matured over time. Narcotico contains in its meaning a dedication to Pierpaolo Pasolini and Antonello da Messina, two souls who have influenced my life in my return to Sicily after so many years. The evolution of the fragrance gives us an unexpected welcome. The soul has found peace. It has found its answer. An accord of patchouli, oud, guaiacud, vetiver, and labdanum reminds us of the place where we often hide our soul, an old drawer forgotten in time. Returning to my land after so many years has shaken my spirit. Telling all this through Narcotico has given answers to my questions. That was very close to be my favorite. But then I tried Odor 93, which is all I love. Brooding, mysterious, yet exciting and inviting at the same time. To remain into the realm of paranormal, for me, it's the type of perfume a banshee would wear, with something foresty and floral, but not in a fresh, sparkly way. Instead, with the depth and the dirt and the warmth of a swamp. Walk in your path, follow the olfactory current with love and will. Odor 93 is a journey into a fairy tale world. An emotional dedication to the band Current 93 and its founder, David Tibet. The odorous fairy tale opens its curtains between smoky and spicy notes. The ritual of the tale is celebrated. The fog hides the event from view, enhances our imagination, this dreamlike journey. Our steps become slower and slower, and the perfume opens the art of the fairy tale. The olfactory current of Odor 93 floats on the obsessive notes of the tuberose and narcissus accord, a fragrant novena in which extras and protagonists participate, dramatic figures in an enchanted forest of northern Europe. If you close your eyes and listen to your path, you will hear grotesque characters of your imagination, and as if by magic, the journey becomes wonder, fairy tale. The dim lights of dawn ask for space among the thick branches of the forest. The perfume spreads its roots. A woody, smoky, and animal background wakes up from the journey. The perfume is a soul that draws our shadows, and the shadow is a grotesque character of our imagination. Each of us around the fire has told or listened to fantastic stories, fairy tales, and legends. Odor 93 drags you into the earth of the fire to discover the secret of the quest, the secret of the current. The fact that he wrote that part about entering into a fairy tale world in an enchanted forest again makes it extremely fitting with what I blindly perceived. I find it very seductive in an unconventional and gothic way. L'Oblio is another dark, musty wood, but with something sweet and gummy going on for me. My unhinged first impression was the interior of a vintage car that drives on its own in empty highways at night. I don't know if that's what he had in mind when he wrote about a journey into oblivion, but to me that checks out. There's something thick and almost sickening in it, yet cozy at the same time. I can only define it as a feverish scent. What if the good of man was to forget rather than remember? I was in Cambodia, a long journey sailing down the Mekong, in search of forgetfulness as salvation. The banks of the great river, the spring dry season, light and shining notes of helichrysum, frankincense, and orange, open this flow in a golden river, a luminous labyrinth of the soul. The arrival at Angkor Wat, the sound of drums in the night, overpowers the silence. It is the dawn of a new day. L'Oblio tells the story of a man's journey in search of forgetfulness. Tiziano Terzani as a spiritual and literary guide, an invitation to travel, to me an even closer bond with the East. The memory flows slowly among the vegetal and smoky notes of mate tobacco. The welcome of iris speaks to the soul. By now we are in the earth of oblivion. When the long journey is about to end, the sweet woody notes of sandalwood and palo santo bring us back to the depths of balance. Only the sunset is missing to define the end, but oblivion remains, like an eternal scent, like dust in ancient temples. A perfume that not only tells the journey, but celebrates a close link between memory and forgetfulness. Oblivion is a spiral of stillness. The metamorphosis cycle that comes right after is two different ways to interpret the contemplation of solitude. And I really got the vision with Little Song. This perfume is a very aromatic version of the steam that clings onto your window's glass when the heater is on and it's snowing outside. That and the sweetest, creamiest coffee, but with the tiniest edge of spice. To me, this is eating and watching TV under a heavy blanket in winter. Alone, not lonely. It managed to make me like the coffee note, while I usually don't. Again, I had no idea that this was about solitude, and his description is incredibly similar to my impressions. A song that becomes sound in silence and perfume. Little Song tells the metamorphosis of time, which inexorably passes through our lives. A perfume that tells of my loneliness and my intimate sensation of time, which flows and changes things. Little Song speaks to the past, how to tell the time that passes, how to find the scent of metamorphosis. In the initial vibration of its citrus and spicy notes, I listen to hope. Little Song is a small song repeated endlessly. It is a cup of coffee left alone on the table in my studio. The scent of its bottom, intense, aromatic. From there I started to remember. Little Song is a bouquet of roses held in my hand. I looked for depth in the rose. I looked for the poetry of its petals, slowly drying, deep and dusty feeling. Little Song is a daily ritual, the cigarette now consumed between the fingers. The pungent tobacco brings the look away. Kafka pages repeated by heart. A scent of earth and smoke, of roots and resins. Finally, even time has its own perfume. I keep writing this little song over and over again, like a lullaby. Little Song is a narrow space. It is a deep connection with life, with the past. A perfume that shakes the heart, that reaches the bottom of the human soul. Unfortunately, I didn't have the same connection with Spirito. When I read his poetic description, I almost felt guilty that what I got from the fragrance was so different. Because that's what it says. It's a distant glance. It's a long walk across the grassy fields. I started to create this perfume by reading Emily Dickinson's poems, being moved by looking at the old yellowed pages of her herbarium. I felt a deep bond with her. I tried to imagine the places where she loved to walk, and from there I started, like a long run in a grassy field, in the summer wind, listening to nature and breathing the freedom of my spirit. An olfactory harmony that captures us from the first notes: angelica, chamomile, carrot seed, a bright and intense perfume. The heart is suave, loving botanical poetry. Cypress, myrtle, hyssop, and lavender. I approach the woods, and like a poetic and olfactory marriage, I smell the immortal notes of cedar, vetiver, guaiacum, elemi, and tonka bean, while in the sky the distant field disappears. At the threshold of the woods, I read these poems. I listen to the sense of a woody symphony. Spirito represents the spiritual bond between man and nature, between spirit and poetry. Dear Emily, in your poetry my mind was set free. In a place never seen I found peace to tell me the whole truth. An experience far away from everything. Like all the others, I smelled it blind. And unfortunately, I couldn't help but perceiving it as a more classical man fougere, which is a category that really doesn't speak to me, almost all the times. Just from the name alone, I expected something that mystical and deep. Instead, I just perceived it as very green and fresh spicy, with something slightly acidic. I don't want to diminish it, because you can tell how complex and well done it is. But it's definitely not my style and not what I expected from the name. It's possibly the one that I liked less from the entire set. Luckily, or not luckily for my wallet, the Timeless trilogy follows, which is a chapter that I particularly love. Varanasi's reputation precedes it. If you know, you know. So I was prepared to an ultra-challenging stink bomb. And it is challenging, but it's way less vulgar and unwearable than people make it up to be. It definitely evokes mud, rotting wood, but in a glorified, almost poetic, spiritual way. I do get how people can perceive a fecal note, but I mean, it's still a perfume. And probably one of the most powerful in the set, from the artistic and conceptual point of view. This is in fact what Fusciuni was going for, the authentic soul of India. Varanasi is inspired by my trip to India, experienced in 2017. It tells what of India has remained in my heart, mind, soul, and nose. Varanasi is a sacred and profane place of smell, full of contrasts and meanings. I composed this perfume letting myself be guided by the visceral emotion I felt the day I felt the sacred water of the Ganges in my hand. I tried to search my olfactory memory and found the source from which everything was created. Varanasi is an olfactory mandala, where the aquatic, animal, and visceral notes of the grey amber cradle our soul. The ritual begins with the warm and red spicy notes of saffron, nutmeg, and cardamom, a dizzying approach to the floral heart, amulets of roses and jasmine, a dusty and woody body of ambrette and cypriol. Like a sadhu covered in white ash, the ritual takes shape among the sacred notes of nard, incense, and gurjam. Perfume becomes a magical experience without compromise. A whirling chant rises in the Varanasi night, the temple, the shadows walking around, oud, vetiver, and the mystic leather cord envelop our body. Sounds of unknown instruments. On the slow river, the dawn comes. Varanasi is the place where spirituality sublimates the human being, where souls will try to find refuge. Varanasi is a magnetic scent. Completely different is Encore de Thames. Not my favorite as in perfumes I would wear, but it's the one scent that literally made me cry. For me, it's an enchanted garden under the moonlight, and here's a little story time no one asked for. As a little child, I was obsessed with drawing this one garden with stained glass doors and a wishing well covered in ivy and flowers. I think one day I was with my best friend at daycare, and we caught a glimpse of a private garden similar to this one for the fraction of a second. My hometown is in fact full of luxurious private gardens inside unassuming buildings. It's a very egoistic city. Well, somebody opened the gate while we were passing by. This vision got tattooed in my mind, apparently, because I idealized it as the epitome of the locus amanus I could never see in real life again. And I drew it over and over again, to the point I have no idea how much of that garden has ever really existed anymore. I digress, but that's how the garden in those drawings would smell like. I had a mini heart attack reading that the magnolia flowers is in the notes, because there was this huge magnolia tree in the inner yard of my childhood home, and that put everything together in my mind. But this is his official description. I wish time would stop now. Encore du Temps is a love dedication. It is a flower fallen into a cup of tea. It was a trip to Laos that made me understand the timeless love between two people, that gave birth to my desire to tell you about this journey, to a place where time is a state of mind, where all is lost in a smile, like a slow black and white movie, like certain moments in life. That tea seemed to never end, as the little osmanthus flowers floated among the swirls of the cup. It was just love, and we wished we still had time to live that moment of our lives, sitting on the terrace of a historic colonial house in Luang Prabang. From there, our gaze lost to the river, a gentle and delicate opening, loving since its first olfactory steps. A gentle note of bergamot and mandarin opens the way to the heart. A white canvas sprinkled with green tea, on which rests osmanthus, warm, voluptuous, and fruity. The same canvas on which rests the poetry of champaka flower. In its Asian sense, I feel my beloved Asia, and the walks in the forest. Next to them, the great magnolia is a dedication. In the background, the sweetness of benzoin from Laos, the care of sandalwood, and the memories of mate tell a delicate ending. The osmanthus today grows in our garden, giving us a fragrant and delicate flowering in autumn. On autumn evenings, as I walk by, its fruity scent takes me back to Laos, Indochina. It reminds me of the feeling I have for the woman I love every day. I would love more time again and again and again. Sonyi pitilessly insists on this introspective, teary-eyed moment. It's an incredibly cozy wood rice fragrance. Story time again. I guess that if you reach the end of this video, you're magically turned into a professional therapist. When I moved in Canada alone, one of the things I started doing very frequently was cooking enormous quantities of rice with tofu whenever I had the time, so that I could eat it through the week when I was too busy to cook. This perfume smells like a sweeter version of the rice that gets stuck at the bottom of the pan when I forget to turn it for too long. Fushuni actually created it after his trip to Japan. That's what he wrote. Where am I? Am I dreaming, or maybe it's reality? Sonye, meaning dreams, tells about that moment suspended between a dream and real life, that moment in which our mind and our heart are still in a distant place and we feel lost, confused, as if suspended. With Sonye, I told my love for Japan, the memories of past travels, my passion for Kawabata's literature, Kurosawa's films, and bonsai. I tried to tell a new story with a warm woody scent, my Japanese dream. One day, a long time ago, I thought and dreamed of being able to create a perfect woody perfume, where the different woods tell the story of time, the flow of life itself, once again a challenge, a perfume that could be unique, exciting, and captivating. Sonye is the realization of my desire, an immediate experience, incredibly close to reality and the nature of things, aesthetic devotion of nature. The opening of Sonye is tatami wood and Japanese pine needles. We are in an ancient ryokan in Kyoto, and the rain has stopped falling. A warm bowl of rice is next to us, reminding us of the simplicity of life, its purity. Attention brings to the nose the green, clear and transparent note of bamboo forest. The flowery note of the peony is instead an exciting haiku, an instant that preludes the awakening of our soul from the dream. Finally, the lights of dawn envelop the woody notes of sandalwood, cedar, and the typical accord of the Kodo ritual, incense. A journey into the beauty of Japanese harmony. So yeah, very different countries and experiences, but still meant to describe a moment of reflection and self-care and poetic mundanity and peace. And it does that perfectly. To me, this perfume is softness in its purest, most moving form. The last but definitely not least samples in the set do not belong to any cohesive chapter, but they are incredible stories on their own. I already knew from the name that I would have liked Viole Nere, but it almost left me speechless, which is hard. I only had a rush of very clear images. Vampire, old mansion, dusty, expensive soap bars, antique doll, velvet everywhere, ghosts. Absolute masterpiece. I can clearly smell 3 layers the deeper I nail. Violets, dust, vanilla. And those in my mind correspond to 3 veils of different colors, one on top of the other, purple, gray, cream. I don't know if that makes sense to you, but to me it's perfect rendition. In springtime, the violet tells the blossoming of the soul. There is a place where my thoughts find refuge, where I absent myself from the world, where I read my poems aloud at the dawn of March, as the first violets of the year emerge from the still frosty ground. That place is the garden of my soul. In Viole Nere, I address the theme of absence and blackness, in which I hide my being, abandon my mind, where the word becomes a boulder to which I bind my spirit, and where poetry becomes a form of invocation. Perfume becomes marble, black on black. I have chosen to tell a new story that has the scent of black violets. Viole Nere was born from my desire to tell my love for the garden, as a physical and spiritual place, as a mirror of my consciousness. I did this by interpreting the famous violet, a flower that is austere and delicate, yet has a strong character. My violet perfume tells of March mornings, when the earth is still damp and cold, wet from late winter, and the first lights of spring illuminate the meadow, a ritual that is repeated year after year. The crisp note of cassis tells of the freshness of those mornings. The accord of vetiver, patchouli, and frankincense takes us back to the earth, to our roots. Violet, iris, and floral accord are the emotion, the light, and the elegance. A contemporary classic, a 90s-20s violet, but for the new century. Finally, last season, that for me was rain and tears in the pines, wet soil and wet stones. The most resinous part emerges with the slightest bit of warmth, but still, to me, is the coldest facet of autumn. Not an autumn spent listening to the crackle of the fireplace. It's an autumn locked outside. I thought that was the reason behind the name, like last season of the year. Actually, that's what he meant instead. What does the voice of nature smell like? Imagine the world suddenly discovering itself to you, through the forests, the water of the Baltic, the light filtering through the leaves of centuries-old trees. Imagine hearing for the first time in forever the voice of the earth. Last season was born out of a trip I took to Sweden, in those days of peace, beauty, and friendship. I rediscovered for a moment that pure feeling that is our destiny. To always go deeper, to experience them, to understand and rejoice them, to venture into life. That depth is told through this fragrance, which leaves voice only to nature. Last season recounts my first steps in that pristine place. In a warm August morning, the aromatic notes tell of the arrival of the island of mosses. Everything here is submerged, and like ancestral lunar presences, algae bind us to the water, lying on the dark rocks of the Baltic. And then the steps, slow, respectful, of us guests in this green, earthy, moist place. The sun warms the bark of the trees. Animals watch from their densas, men alone in the heart of nature. Mother Nature, I have crossed all the seas to see you, crossed all the forests to speak to you, to listen to your scent, and now that I'm here, I'm speechless. I close my eyes and listen to your essence in this last season. So yeah, I was a bit out of line with my interpretation this time, but you know what? The fragrance spoke to me, and that's what it decided to tell me, and that's fine. Sadly, its last release, Buio, wasn't in this set, so I didn't get to try it, but I will eventually. This was an amazing journey. Whoever manages to get their hands on his full bottles is so lucky, because these are pieces of art. If I could pick some right now, I would definitely go for Viole Nere, Odor 93, Narcotico, and Sogni, all for different reasons. but I loved almost all of them. Let me know in the comments below if you tried them, what your favorites are, or which ones you feel compelled to try if you didn't already. Thank you so much for watching. Like, share, and subscribe if you want to support me. And I'll see you very soon. Good night, have very strange dreams.